Increasingly, the role of college football head coaches is a CEO role. And so clearly understanding your approach to building and managing staff becomes very important. Next, what's your approach to playing the game? What's your style? What do you do? How do you achieve victory on the football field?
People who have been around the program for a very long time, and there's a handful of names in the mix, but none that I am hearing more excitement and intrigue about, both short and long term, than Marcus Freeman. He's the defensive coordinator, met with them every single week this fall. He is as impressive as any leader, coach that I've been around. And probably one source said it best, was that he's more of a CEO than a defensive coordinator already, and he's a great defensive coordinator.
Looks like Notre Dame has its man in the aforementioned defensive coordinator, Marcus Freeman, who any day now should be promoted at 35 years old to replace Brian Kelly as head coach.
Good for him.
At the University of Notre Dame. So, Mike.
Good for him.
Have you ever heard a track by a cat named Eric Robertson called Lessons?
I haven't, but you're going to give it to me, right?
The chorus goes, now I realize that everyone that let me down led me to you. All those sleepless nights, all the heartbreak I had led me to you. If I never went through it, I would never find a love like you. Oh, I mean,
go back to the first line again. Go back to the first line. You got me at the first line.
Let me down. Everyone that let me down led me to you. Oh, it's a beautiful song. My kids even love this song. I'm like, what y'all listening to this song for? None of y'all have been brokenhearted. Like, my kids love it. My son goes to sleep to it. It's a beautiful song, beautifully written song. But it came to mind because I believe in what I've heard, what I've read, what I've researched about Marcus Freeman, who I've never met. I believe that this was a blessing from touchdown Jesus for the University of Notre Dame. Because, and you know how I've been on one the last few days because of Brian Kelly moving on to LSU in the way and at the moment that he did. Yeah. Well, in the short term, Notre Dame keeps continuity, they keep consistency, they keep cohesion, they keep culture, they keep connection. All those things remain in place. Not to mention both the strength and conditioning coach and offensive coordinator Tommy Rees are staying put as opposed to going to LSU with Brian Kelly, who also wanted to bring Marcus Freeman with him. All those things remain in place. And going back to the college football playoff committee and how it may view sixth-ranked Notre Dame in the event that a Michigan or an Oklahoma State or Cincinnati even though they beat Notre Dame, or Alabama, whoever, in the event that things break right to get Notre Dame into the top four, promoting Marcus Freeman makes it a hell of a lot harder for the College Football Playoff Committee members to use Kelly's departure against Notre Dame when it comes to putting him in the playoffs. So I talked about the perfect script being Marcus Freeman making his debut and leading a motivated Fighting Irish, even if it's to slaughter against Georgia, leading them in the playoffs. And that seems like that's going to be the case. At least he'll be the head coach. We'll see what happens after championship weekend. But I'm excited about this for a lot of reasons. Long term, which I'll get to momentarily, but I'll pass it to you in the meantime. But I'll get to the long term effects in a second.
Well, first of all, that's a beautiful, I'm glad you shared that song. I'm going to look that up. And the fact that your son and your daughter, teenagers are listening to all three of your kids listening to it?
All of them.
Even your 9-year-olds listening to it? Okay.
They love it. Eric Robertson. Lessons.
That tells me that communication, good, effective communication can reach those who are 9, can reach those who are 15, those who are 55, 75. That's great. But two, you shouldn't be surprised about a free man named Marcus. Because where did he go to school? First of all, where's his alma mater? This is how we built, man. This is what we do in the Buckeye State. He's an Ohio State Buckeyes 4-year letterman. Had a lot of Buckeyes on that scarlet and gray helmet at his time in Columbus. So he spent a lot of time in Cincinnati too. He was in Cincinnati before he got to Notre Dame. So that's one.
The team. That's
two.
Build that team.
You shouldn't be surprised.
Yeah.
You shouldn't be surprised. But I'm going to add to the description of the Notre Dame athletic director, and he talked about, hey, college football is about being a CEO, and then how do you play the game? The number 3 thing is something that Freeman has already established at Notre Dame, and that is recruiting. You can talk all you want about it. You can talk about being a CEO. You can talk about your strategy. If you can't recruit, if you don't get the kids, you can't go there. The Bill Belichick of college, who has like the 35th best recruiting class, is going to wind up being the Adam Gase of college. You'll be around. You'll lose more than you win. People will talk about your flawless game plans, but you won't be able to compete. College football, it's about recruiting. And already going into the 2022 season, Notre Dame has the 4th best recruiting class. Now, you think about the competition. Think about that room. The room is always Georgia.
Right. It's Georgia 1, Alabama 2, Texas A&M 3, Notre Dame 4, Ohio State 5, and then if you want to go to 2023, Michael, it's Georgia 1, Notre Dame 2, and having this guy in place.
And think about it.
Helps keep those classes in
place. Mike, you're always going to be around that kind of company. So if you want to win a national championship at Notre Dame, you have to recruit at a top 5 pace consistently. It can't be every now and then we get a top 5 recruiting class. You're going to have to do it. Now, I'm going to pass it back to you on this thought. I remember going out to South Bend. This must have been, Tyrone Willingham's first season at Notre Dame. So the last time Notre Dame had a black coach, that's when I was on campus out of South Bend. So I talked with Tyrone Willingham, and I brought up some of my familiar criticisms of Notre Dame. And it was, hey, coach, look, I know you're at a high-profile school, and they've got all this history and the icons of yesteryear, and you go by, you walk under, through that tunnel, and you touch all the important things before you go to the field, and your helmet is shining, and everybody's excited. I said, this is all great, but it's not 1960 anymore. Like, you're competing for championships, and it's really hard to win championships when other schools don't have the restrictions that you have in Notre Dame. And you know what he said was great. Now, he ultimately wasn't the man for the job. He had the right things to say, but he couldn't get it done, and they moved on from Tyrone Willingham. But he said, I find it hard to believe that we have such low expectations as a country that we can't demand both. So why does it have to be mutually exclusive? Why does it have to be, you have no standards and you just focus completely on athletics, and that's the only way you win a championship. But if you focus on academics, then you got to settle. He said, I don't think we have to settle at this school or as a country. And
Notre Dame.
And I think he's right. He wasn't the right guy for it, but I think if you find the right guy, and Marcus Freeman might be that man. He might be the one pulling the sword from the stone. But if he's that guy, maybe for the first time in over 30 years, Notre Dame can get back to being serious. I know they've been in the playoffs, but a favorite. When's the last time they were a championship favorite? It's been a long time.
You're setting me up nicely. Notre Dame doesn't have to settle.
That's what I do.
And I don't believe that university, not really. It was an accident. Notre Dame, that university, Jack Swarbrick, I don't believe that they would have entrusted this university to a 35-year-old who has been a defensive coordinator at a Power 5 school for 1 year, 1 season, who's been on campus for 11 months, if he weren't the real deal. Michael, it reminds me, it's Mike Tomlin-ish. And here's what I mean by that. I'm not saying he's Mike Tomlin. I've never met Marcus Freeman. I'm not saying he is Mike Tomlin, but I'm saying it reminds me of Mike Tomlin in that I met Mike Tomlin when he was a defensive backs coach in Tampa. Remember, he went to Minnesota for 1 year, And it's not like they had the #1 defense in the league or anything like that, but he went to Minnesota for 1 year as defensive coordinator, interviews in Pittsburgh, blows them away. They pass on Russ Grimm and Ken Wisenhunt, and Bill Cowher's successor is Mike Tomlin, and the rest is history. And that's the reason why the Eric Robertson song Lessons, I referenced it earlier, because I think Notre Dame, thanks to Brian Kelly's departure, may have ended up with a star who just needed an opportunity. Like, they may have a star in the making in Freeman, because he has everything you're looking for, both schematically and personality-wise. And you already talked about the recruiting and his recruiting prowess both at Cincinnati and now at Notre Dame. They keep this up, and the players, I mean, we're pounding the table. We heard Jack Collinsworth talk about earlier this week. Players pounding the table, university community pounding the table. And they're not going to do that for just anybody. Like, this is Notre freaking Dame. They can get whoever they want practically. I know it's unprecedented for somebody to leave Notre Dame that didn't retire or go to the NFL or get fired, but nonetheless, they have pretty much their pick of the litter. So they didn't just do this to placate players. They didn't just do this because they wanted to, keep as much continuity as possible this season on the off chance that they get in the playoffs. They think that highly of Marcus Freeman, okay? And so I'm here to say right now, I said this earlier, I'm going to double down on it right here, Mike.
Double down.
Marcus Freeman wins a national championship before Brian Kelly does at LSU. I'm going to say it again for the cheap seats. Marcus Freeman wins a national championship at Notre Dame before Brian Kelly does. And here's why I believe that, all right? He's already shown that he can recruit Notre Dame. He can already show he can recruit Notre Dame, all right? Notre Dame is on the cusp of going to the playoffs for the third time in 4 seasons, okay? So in much the same way that Lincoln Riley, among his many factors in going from Oklahoma to USC, decided the clearer path to the college football playoff was in the Pac-12 versus the SEC, Marcus Freeman and Notre Dame have a clearer path to the playoff than LSU, which I realize, of course I realize, that not only did Nick Saban win a championship at LSU, but the likes of Les Miles and Ed Orgeron won championships at LSU. So I know that. I understand that, okay? But Brian Kelly has to go and rebuild or retool a USC program in the midst of an SEC West that includes Bama, Lane Kiffin's Ole Miss, A&M. I don't think Auburn's going to be down forever. That's to make no mention of the best program in the country right now, which is Georgia in the SEC East. Do you think Florida stays down forever? I know they just hired a new coach, but do you think Florida stays down forever? Oh, and by the way, here comes Oklahoma and Texas, who can also recruit. I know Texas is struggling right now, but it's still Texas. And Oklahoma's coming. They're going to find somebody to coach at Oklahoma. So the grass was literally greener for Brian Kelly in Baton Rouge. But the sailing is not smoother to the college football playoff, even though at LSU you get the players. We just saw them win a championship a couple of years ago. I know it can be done, but it's infinitely harder. So while Brian Kelly is the proven commodity and LSU offered more money and better recruiting opportunities, if Marcus Freeman can continue to recruit at Notre Dame the way he has so far, and if he is both the schematic and the schematic genius and the leader that he is purported to be, based on what I've seen, read, and heard about him, then Notre Dame may have lucked up and landed on a star, and I think they can win a national championship before Brian Kelly does at LSU. I believe that that's going to happen. That's my prediction.
All right. Okay, I like it. I like it. Now let me ask you about the loophole in the conversation, because I'm listening to what you said, and no, you're not missing anything. I'm just saying, this is how some people do. This is how, by the way, this is how leagues come up with, salary cap restrictions and everything, because they lay out the rules, And then somebody with a twisted mind says, well, the rule didn't say that. So they try to find any way they can to manipulate the rules that are in place. That's why salary cap rules in the NFL and the NBA are this thick. They're all based on actual cases where somebody tried to manipulate it, and then the league said, wait a minute, that wasn't the spirit of it, so we got to write something else into it. So I'm that dude. I'm that dude who is looking at what you're saying, and then I'm going to ask this. Is it still an accurate statement if neither of them wins a national championship? So I think you're saying, hey, you're not guaranteeing that Marcus Freeman's going to win a national championship. What you're saying is, if he does it, he'll do it before Brian Kelly does it, and that maybe
Sure.
the
And I'm not
maybe
talking
the
about
other
this
part
year
of it
either.
is he'll come closer. He'll come closer than Brian Kelly will.
And I'm not even counting this year. I'm not not trying to be slick and say that, well, Notre Dame gets in the playoff this year, they win it this year because they're in the playoff. But last I checked, in order to win a championship, you have to get to the playoff first. And Notre Dame has an easier path. Huh?
If they do win, is it his? If they win this year, I don't think they will. But I'm saying if they win it this year, if they get into the playoff, is it Kelly's or is it Freeman?
But that's not the point. That wasn't my point. My point
I know.
was
I'm just asking.
I'm saying no. I answered the question. I said no. It's not his, but that wasn't my point, and it wasn't what I was trying to get at in saying that he'll sneak in and win it this year. My point is that Marcus Freeman is set up for success.
I know what your point is. I was about to cuss on that. I know what your point is. You don't have to tell me again.
At a program that's gone 44-6 the last 4 years, thanks to Brian Kelly, thanks to the infrastructure and the culture that Brian Kelly implemented. That's the overall point. If he happens to get in and win this year, no, I wouldn't say, hey, that's Marcus Freeman's championship, and see, I told you so, that he would win before Brian Kelly.
Well,
my point
I think that's where you're wrong.
That I like that he has an opportunity here. And let's answer my Twitter friend who decided to.
Before we get there, because I was gonna go there. I was gonna bring that up. Ooh, I'm so I just get so. See, man, I don't even know why you do this. I don't even know why you go to these streets, because like these streets are violent. These streets are chaotic. They bring stress. Man, my blood pressure is high. It's too high right now. What's this dude's name? Aaron Kaiser. Not even a real person. Like, don't let these people just drive me crazy. And you're 100% correct. You're 100% correct with your response.
Yeah.
But my goodness, like, it's so hard to communicate with people like this.
Don't let them steal your joy, because I'm glad that my man brought race into it. Here's why. How about this stretch for the Bros in college football, which historically, as you know, has struggled when it comes to elevating black coaches? We go from Mel Tucker getting 95 million over 10 years at Michigan State, to James Franklin playing the rumor mill to perfection and parlaying it into yet another contract at Penn State. And now a 35-year-old brother who has 1 year defensive coordinator is the head coach at Notre Dame? Wow. It ain't even February. It ain't even February, Mike.
I know.
This is crazy.
Hey, by the way, if that happens, and you outline your reasoning for Marcus Freeman winning a national championship before Brian Kelly, you outlined it. You have very solid reasons. I would say it's an unassailable take. I would say that, and I don't like to say that about you, but you might get the big head. But yeah, it's true. It really is. I mean, there are a lot of good reasons to go with that. Now, but if that happens, it's historic. We've never had a black coach win a national championship. It has not happened.
I didn't even think about that.
Football.
I didn't think about that when I said it.
He does it. He does it before Brian Kelly. That's one. But then two, it's historic for Marcus Freeman. But okay, let's go back. Let's go back to this dude. This cat, this Kaiser.
Oh, don't give him that much
Mike. But no, I'm just saying this. Like, when I can, I try to avoid having conversations with people who have their minds made up. And so that's why, that's a really big reason that I just don't really engage with Twitter. I don't engage with Twitter. I use Twitter, but I don't engage with Twitter. Because you know what? Twitter is not built for conversations. So when you say these things, nobody, I shouldn't say nobody. That's just too much. I'm going too far. Very few people go to Twitter to have a thoughtful exchange of ideas. It is fertile ground for trolls, whether they know it or not. Intentional, unintentional trolls is fertile ground for it.
Dave Chappelle, yeah. Twitter's not a real place.
It's not a real place. It's not a real place where people want to have real conversations. But that kind of stuff just makes you wonder who's capable of listening. Like you said this, you're a black man. Clearly, you can't change that. You're a black man who had a take on Marcus Freeman and Brian Kelly, and this a-hole takes it somewhere else. It's just so frustrating. And I wonder, like, how often does that happen? Are we having a conversation? Are we having a conversation with nuance and all this stuff? Or do a lot of people just hear, black guy talking about black guy stuff, and they're the same?
Yes. That is our lot in life, my friend.
Why am I here? What am I doing? I'm spending time I'm thinking about this stuff. I'm really trying to carefully consider some of the topics of the day. Trying to, oh man, this guy's, I got to shake this guy off in the next couple minutes. Hey, thanks for watching Brother from Another on YouTube. Make sure you hit subscribe before you leave, and be sure to watch us 3 to 5 p.m. Eastern Time on Peacock. Appreciate you.